Good morning and welcome to Silk Life Online. We're continuing with our series on prayer this morning. It's great to have you with us if you're connecting through Facebook or YouTube. We're here still running our hybrid service of some people in the room, some people at home accessing the meeting through Zoom. I am finding it very interesting seeing how different people are responding to the release of lockdown. It's fascinating, isn't it? Different people responded when we went into lockdown. There's a whole plethora of different responses coming out. I've actually noticed in myself, I'm probably more of the extrovert, enjoy being around people, recharge with people end of the spectrum. But after 18 months of being told to stay home and not see people, actually I suddenly find it a little bit more tricky. And I've been around people and I'm much more inclined to choose an evening at home by myself. I'm noticing a difference in myself. It's almost like a learned behaviour. And there's a certain amount of almost crunch to this sense of what does it look like to go back to normal, inverted commas, when it isn't really normal yet. It's actually one huge, great big social experiment, and I'm sure in the years to come there'll be PhD assignments and books written on the topic of how a nation emerged from an 18-month lockdown. Let me encourage you, though, to think about this. You don't need to be buffeted and pushed about by what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. You don't need to be moulded by other people's expectations, by the church's expectations. I want you to ask yourself, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want the experience of my life to feel like? How do I want to put together the jigsaw pieces of my life so there's room for the things that matter most to me? If you picture a map of the week or a table, once you've allocated sleep, work and church and family and general life admin, actually the schedule starts to look pretty full, pretty quick. And I expect actually for many of us, the inner space, the spiritual space, that being attentive to God and our own consciousness it's so unquantifiable that it's really easy to neglect it in favour of task and commitments and even entertainment. But in John 10, Jesus gives us one of these catchphrases that's so much more than just a truism or a soundbite, that actually it should be a rule of life for us. It's one of those phrases that we can structure our lives around. He says this, John 10:27, you can look it up. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. It's great to hear Joe sharing from the same passage in worship. In this conversation, Jesus has described himself as the good shepherd. And he describes the pathway, not just through life, but to eternal life. And it's not just a good memory verse for children's Bible classes. We love a good sheep-related Bible story, those of us that do children's work. You get the cotton wool and the glue, and we're going to craft this verse within an inch of its life. We love those verses, right? Emma's laughing because she knows it's true. There's glue everywhere. Just stick the cotton wool on the sheep, people. This is not just a children's story verse. This is crucial teaching. This is rule of life stuff. The Christian rule of life. My sheep hear my voice. I know them. And they follow me. The shepherd calls the sheep by name and leads them. And the sheep follow him because they know his voice. This is rule of life. If you're coming out of lockdown and you're looking for something to pin it on, you could do an awful lot worse than this. Pin it on this verse. My sheep hear my voice. I know them. And they follow me. Jesus is the good shepherd. He lays down his life for his sheep. And if you aren't sure, you can trust him to lead you away from peril and to surrender himself for your safety. It is a beautiful promise tied up in this. But we easily miss it. We easily downgrade it from a treasure that captures our attention to a sideline triviality of little consequence. The truth is, in order to discern the voice of Jesus, we have to learn to do that. And so we have to make alterations to the rhythms of our existence. I'm going to focus today on the concept of a Sabbath for enriching our prayer life, for teaching us to discern the voice of Jesus, to enable us to hear the voice of the shepherd so that we can follow. You can't follow if you can't hear, if you can't recognize. If you can't tell the difference between the voice of the good shepherd and the voice of the bad shepherd, you don't know which one to follow. So, you may not have heard the term, particularly those of you living at home. You may not have heard, listening at home, not living at home, hopefully you're all living at home. You may not have heard the term Sabbath, but it's a rhythm of life. A space where I can feel my mind settle like untouched water. The word Sabbath comes from us from the Hebrew Shabbat. It means stop. A Sabbath is a day to stop working, stop wanting, stop worrying, stop. It's more than just a day. Those that do Sabbath find actually it shapes the other 6 days. It's a way of being in the world, a spirit of restfulness that comes from abiding, from living in the Father's love and presence all week long. Comes from discerning his voice and following. You remember that story of the Hebrews at the end of Exodus? We rested on it, where it said the cloud lifted when it was time for them to move on, and stopped and settled when it was time for them to make camp. It's a beautiful picture for us of the rhythms of life. We walk in step with the Good Shepherd, we discern his voice, we follow him. There'll be moments when he says it's time to be up and active, and moments when it's time to stop and be untouched water. And it brings about a change in the quality of our existence. Stretched and overcommitted is replaced by margin. Margin for error, margin for reflection, margin for affection. Hurry is replaced by rhythm. Noise is replaced by quiet. Isolation by deep relationships. Crowds by solitude. Distraction by delight. Envy by enjoyment. Confusion by clarity. Greed by gratitude. Discontent by contentment. Worry by trust, and anger by love, and sadness by joy, and anxiety by peace, and stress by fruitfulness. And who doesn't want those things? But when I wrote that list, I thought about myself. I thought, oh, there's a need for some more Sabbath here. There's a need to enter into the rest and peace, the shalom of God. I wonder which list best describes you. The writer of the Hebrews says this: there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. There remains. This is not an out-of-date concept. This isn't something they did thousands of years ago but has no place in modern society. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let's therefore make every effort to enter that rest. There's a certain irony there of making every effort to enter that rest. But the truth is, it doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen by just assuming at some point we will come to the end of our to-do list and find a place of rest. We have to lean in, we have to make a choice to enter Sabbath rest and to see that choice with single-minded determination. It takes self-control to say no to things, even good things, and focus ourselves on the best possible choice. Sabbath is the primary discipline by which we cultivate the spirit of restfulness in our lives. It's how we prepare our minds and bodies for the moments that matter most during the week. Think about it this way. Those moments during the week where you need to be at your best, Sabbath makes makes it happen. Working life, it pushes for quantity of time, doesn't it? Just Dave running on low, though, still gets some stuff done. So work pushes for more time. But Dave running on low is probably a bit bitter, lacks creativity, is quick to snap at other people, and is pretty much near to quitting all the time. That isn't David is best. David is best is fun, creative, patient, in for the long haul. It's true, you might feel like you've never seen that side. Sabbath is the preparation for the moments that matter most. The moments of temptation. The moments of decisive decision making. The moments of care for loved ones. Who on earth manages to resist the quick hit of temptation when they're working feverishly and in a state of depletion? Who manages to make good decisions with a foggy brain of fatigue? Who has the patience to care for a weeping loved one when your own world is falling down? So Sabbath is preparation for the moments that matter most. Let's take a look at Mark 2. One Sabbath, from verse 23, Mark 2:23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look!" As if he hadn't noticed. Probably hadn't, to be honest. Why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And Jesus said to them, "Have you never read what David did? When he was in need and when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God at the time of Abiathar the high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him." And Jesus said to the Pharisees, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." So it's a lazy Saturday afternoon. There's hot, clear skies, and they're hiking through a field. This is the Sabbath. The seventh day was built into Jesus' life like a core practice. A day every week set aside to slow down, to stop. But he gets in trouble with the Pharisees because they didn't like how Jesus and his friends were doing the day. Didn't seem nearly pious or religious or prescriptive enough. And the disciples, they were picking grain, which is work, and they were rolling it in their fingers and maybe even chewing it. The audacity. This is work. Work is not allowed on the Sabbath. Naughty, naughty. Yet again, the Pharisees miss the heart of God whilst gripping mercilessly to a rule. Jesus' rebuke is very, very clear. He pulls out a couple of Old Testament examples that wrong foot them, and then delivers the sucker punch. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And this is the mistake that the Pharisees made again and again, wasn't it? That they prioritised the rules over the people. And Jesus pushed back on the guilt-ridden religious culture because the Sabbath was made for man. The Pharisees needed to hear this because they were entrenched in the rules. But this is still relevant for our society, but for a different reason. Because our culture has pretty much given up on Sabbath. But here is Jesus saying, the Sabbath was made for man. Not man in a certain season of history, but for man. It was made for you. Why? Because it's good for you. Not because God wants you to sit in silence for 24 hours on the naughty step. But because it's good for you. Because it's healthy and ultimately it will make you more fruitful, more happy and more fun to be around. The Sabbath was made for man, but it was also made for the benefit of man's wife and kids. It's a gift to enjoy, not tolerate. It's a gift designed by the Creator and woven into the fabric of creation. So think back to creation. Think back to the Genesis narrative, the creation of the earth. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he was doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Did you catch that? God himself rested. In doing so, he establishes a rhythm into the DNA of creation, a tempo, a syncopated beat. God worked for 6 and rested for 1. And when we fight this rhythm, we're actually fighting against the grain of the universe as he made it. And if you go against the grain, you get splinters. The rhythm isn't the byproduct of a good human idea. There are lots of studies out there from very intelligent people that will support, evidentially, the basis for taking a day's rest each week. There were examples during the French Revolution where they abolished the day's rest and made people work a 10-day working week, and it was a complete disaster. But I'm not leaning on those. What I'm saying is this is how it was wired by the Creator. So here's a moment. What does the writer mean by the notion that God rested? Was God tired after 6 days of hard graft? It's a little bit concerning if that's the case, because I'm kind of relying on him to sustain the cosmos. And if he's going to need a rest after every 6 days, I'm in trouble. So the Hebrew word means to stop, but has a dual meaning. It can also mean delight. And I love this notion. I love the notion of God creating the universe and then standing back to stop and delight. Do you remember that on each day of the creation narrative, God said it was good. He affirmed it. He said, I like that. It's turned out well, that one. And then on the seventh day, stops to delight in the beautiful creation. So intricate, so complex. Humanity hasn't even managed to explore the highest points and the lowest points and the hottest points and the coldest points. We're still discovering all the time. And yet in that day, God stood back to enjoy, to delight in that creation. So the Sabbath day is a day set aside for us to stop work and to delight. Delight in the world around us and our lives in it, the events of the week, our relationships, our loved ones, and above all, to delight in God himself. I think this is what Jesus is doing in the cornfield. It's a warm day, and he's walking with loved ones, chatting, enjoying the scenery, enjoying that freedom and that liberty from not running an agenda, but just experiencing being fully present in the moment. Whatever you do with your Sabbath day, make sure it is fully present in the moment. Not fretting over the week gone or the week ahead, but fully present in the cornfield with the friends, to the point where you almost don't notice somebody pluck a corn a week. It's an invitation to enter delight. It should be the best day of our week. It should be the highlight that we look forward to the other 6 days, where we feast, play, dance, spend time with those you love, laugh, tell stories, be creative, walk, watch creation in its fullness. Allow the things you love to stir your heart with happiness. What a liberating message. This is not a message of rules and legalism, but do the stuff you love with the people you love in a way that causes your heart to sing with happiness and gratitude. John Mark Comer teaches a lot on this, and he tells the story of every Friday. He gets a huge, great big pizza dish, and him and his kids, they make up cookie dough, and they warm it up till it's all gooey in the oven, and then they plop ice cream on it, and sauce, and Smarties, and all sorts. And then as a family, they sit around the table, and they eat it with their fingers like animals, but sharing their thankfulness stories of the week together on a Friday night to mark the start of their Sabbath. I mean, they probably don't sleep for a week afterwards. It's probably like a sugar rush through to the next Sabbath. But I love this notion of this family celebration that is completely informal, but just full of joy and delight, and leads them into Sabbath rest. The Genesis narrative says, God blessed the day and made it holy. We brush over that as almost like that's spiritual language. But let's pause on that in a moment. The Sabbath is blessed. Do you know God only blessed 3 things in the creation narrative? Fascinating, this. So he blessed the animal kingdom and told them to be fruitful and multiply. And then he blessed humanity with the same blessing to be fruitful and multiply. And then God blessed the Sabbath. Animals, humans, and a special day. So what we can draw from that is that the Sabbath has the same life-giving capacity to multiply and procreate as animals and humans. So the Sabbath has the power to fill the world with life. The Sabbath will be fruitful and multiply. It's how we fill our souls with life. That is astounding. And then we're told that the Sabbath is holy. And we're used to the idea of holiness in relation to holy books, to holy temples, to holy mountains, to shrines and to pilgrimages. But the God that we worship is not found in a relic or a place. But we're told that the Sabbath day is holy. So we find God in the Sabbath day. If you want a pilgrimage to experience God, you don't have to leave Macclesfield. You just set aside a day of the week and pilgrimage into his presence, because we're told that the Sabbath day is blessed and holy. We learn a lot about Sabbath in Exodus. It's good to lean on this book as we've spent so long working on it, right? So chapter 16, Israel was fresh out of Egypt, camped around Mount Sinai, and God provides food for them in the desert. Verse 23 of chapter 16, Moses says to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord." So on the 7th day, there was no gathering of the food that God was providing for them. No work to be done. This is significant because they used to be slaves in the Egyptian Empire. The Egyptian Empire had been devouring human beings, one brick at a time, one pyramid at a time, for centuries. It was an empire driven by lust for more. And like every empire, Egypt was built on an economic system that was built on the back of the oppressed. And to get to the lavish luxury of Pharaoh, you need cheap labour. You need slaves grinding their bodies to the ground. Slaves don't get Sabbath. They don't get a day off until they die. Slaves are subhuman, bought and sold and then crushed. Egypt is alive and well because we live in a culture of unquenchable lust for more. More food, more clothes, more devices, more apps, more stuff, more square footage, more experience, more sex, more global trotting, more. Never grateful, always more. If you look at a global wealth pyramid, the top 0.7 of humanity has 46% of the world's wealth. That's shocking. 0.7 has 46% of the world's wealth. computer, you have more than one pair of shoes, and you ever buy coffee from a coffee shop, that's you. At the bottom of the pile, 70% of the population accounts for 2.7% of the world's wealth. Mostly in Southeast Asia and Africa, the people who make our clothes, our smartphones, and our Star Wars franchise lunchboxes, many working 7 days a week and 12-hour days. The Hebrews used to be slaves, working every day. But now they've been rescued. Now their new master commands that they rest and celebrate his deliverance and provision. This is one of the first instructions that they receive after the Exodus. So it's important, it matters. It's one of the first things God took time to tell them. He's establishing a new rhythm for them that they didn't know before. It was countercultural to the lifestyle that they were used to, and it's still countercultural to the culture that we live in now. So God needs to establish a new rhythm for us now. See, most of you will be familiar with these concepts, but many of us are not doing it, because the culture we live in doesn't naturally encourage it. But Sabbath isn't passive. It's actually an act of resistance. It's an act of rebellion against Pharaoh and the empire. It's an insurgency against the lust for more. It's a way to stay free and never get sucked back into slavery, or worse still, become a slave driver yourself. It's scheduled social justice. For the Hebrews, to Sabbath served as a weekly reminder of their responsibility as a new nation to never exploit the weakest, because they serve a God of holiness and justice. Let me say, if you're a leader at home or in a room, you're a leader in the workplace, there's an opportunity to bring kingdom wisdom to bear on your workforce, whether they're people of faith or not. An opportunity to deploy kingdom justice in ensuring that your workplace is not built upon exploitation of your staff. Ensure that they have time to complete their work in the allotted hours, and then incentivize Sabbath rest in a way that honours our Creator God. Just a couple of chapters later, in chapter 20, God lays out the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments, as you know, is the framework that will govern the Hebrew nation for a generation. But one command is way longer than the rest. In fact, if you drew a pie chart of the Ten Commandments on the basis of word count and column inches.
That's what my plate looks like.
I want to see that later. But one command would take 30% of the pie chart. It's a third of the pie chart. Which one? Well, it would be a rubbish point if it wasn't the Sabbath one, wouldn't it? So we'll just go with that. You guessed it. Remember the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. Let me read it to you from verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work. And by the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or your female servant, not your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Note this, the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord. It can also be translated as set apart for the Lord or dedicated to the Lord. Now, hopefully your brain synapses are kicking off at that point, remembering we talked about set apart. We talked about consecration. We know about that. Set apart in devotion to God. So the Sabbath day is consecrated, set apart to delight in God. Sabbath isn't just a day of rest, it's not just a day off, it's a day of worship. I don't mean singing endlessly, although singing, that brings you joy, but whole life orientation to God. talked about this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. We orientate our hearts to who God is. The Sabbath day is a day set apart to orientate ourselves to who God is in the midst of busy lives. And in the process bring joy and life to our hearts. Eugene Peterson says, if we just view the Sabbath as a day off, then we make the Sabbath day, the seventh day, an illegitimate child. He isn't quite that polite. Then John Mark Comer says, when I Sabbath, I run each activity through this twin grid. Is this rest and is it worship? If the answer is no, or kind of, then I simply hold off, because there are 6 other days for that. Serious discipline, right? 6 other days for that. So Sabbath equals rest and worship and nothing else. Rest and worship actually are broad categories. It isn't legalism. There is no list. If you love it, do it. Your Sabbath probably looks different to mine. But anything that indexes your heart towards grateful recognition of God's reality and goodness is on the table. Do you know that Sabbath is the only spiritual discipline that makes it into the 10 Commandments? Not thought, not church, not prayer, not Bible reading, not fasting, and not tithing. So should have had tithing in there. They're not in the 10 Commandments. But Sabbath is, with a big tick, 30% of the pie chart. When God took hold of the tribe of slaves and defined them as a holy nation, he embedded into the community structure a day of Sabbath. It's the same day of Sabbath that he wove into creation in Genesis. I love this. Got goosebumps in just getting to the point. So in rescuing Israel from slavery in Egypt, he restores the Sabbath to them. It's like the created order. There'd been the fall. They were caught up in slavery. He rescues them, and then he restores it to them. It was lost, and now he puts it back. And it's a beautiful foreshadow of what happens for us as Christians. In Jesus, we're rescued from our own slavery. And from Jesus, we hear these beautiful words. The Sabbath is for man. So in one step, he's rebuking the Pharisees, but in another step, he's breathing life over humanity. He's prophesying life over humanity. Jesus restores the Genesis pattern of rest and delight to us because he says it's for you. He breathes it over you. It's for you. It's for you to delight and find life. Sabbath rest is part of Jesus' inheritance. And as co-heirs with Christ, we share in his inheritance. As co-heirs with Christ, we inherit a pattern of setting aside a time to rest and to delight, to walk with friends through the cornfields on a warm summer's day and allow our hearts to overflow with contentment and gratitude. We lost it in the fall, in the decay of the cosmos, but in Christ it's been breathed back over us. It's for you. It's good for you. Receive it. In the same way as he breathed the Spirit over his disciples, he breathed Sabbath rest over us. It is for you. Adopted children of God, he is breathing it over you. A lifestyle of gratitude, appreciation, peace, and prayer. It's a way of working from rest, not depletion. And a way of bearing fruit from abiding in him. It's so good. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we love you. We worship you. We orientate ourselves to you. Lord, help us to hear your voice, to recognize your voice above all others, and to follow you. Help us to enter your Sabbath rest and learn to Rest. Learn to find peace. Learn to find thankfulness and worship as we pause from task, but help us to learn to discern your voice as we put aside other voices, as we put aside other distractions. Help us to learn to recognise the voice that has always been there, whispering love and affection over us. Let worship bubble up in our hearts as we engage in a Sabbath, consecrated, set apart for the Lord. Renew us, restore us, refresh us. Equip us for the moments that matter most as we marinate in your presence. I just want to pause in a moment where some people listening, either live or recorded, have that remarkable sense of complete lack of peace. I talked about stilled, untouched waters, and you feel like your waters are like this, or just constantly covered in ripples of anxiety and activity and task and frenzy. I just want to use the words of Jesus to say that the Sabbath is for you. Sabbath rest is for you. Even in this moment, the peace of God is for you. May the peace of Christ dwell richly in you. It is a promise of God. Oh God, I pray that you just press it down and push it in. The peace of God that surpasses all understanding, all circumstances, all challenges. The peace of God. Let there be shalom. Lord, I pray for a breaking of slavery that binds people up in a 24/7 frenzy. That you would define new life over our community. And I pray for those that are struggling, that you speak freedom over them. No longer slaves, but a royal priesthood. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. It's been a super privilege to have you check us out either on Facebook or YouTube. Do continue to do so. Feel free to get in touch, drop us a message. We'd love to hear from you. If we can pray for you, let us know. And hopefully we'll see you again in weeks to come.